All right. Welcome everyone to another TMF week presentation soiree. I'm joined by Fran Ross, independent consultant, Lucid GXP. We're going to be getting underway in a few minutes. I'm just going to let everybody fold in from their last meeting, their last session, the networking breaks. If you guys can just let me know if you hear us loud and clear, where you're coming in from, if you're watching from an interesting or equally uninteresting area, just let us know. All right, perfect. Everyone can hear us. That's good. So we'll get it kicked off. So as I mentioned, welcome everyone to another episode, another session of TMF Week 2022. We are now on day 4, which is focused on everything from TMF regulations, inspections, standards, models, the whole shebang. Today we have a really great session I've been looking forward to all week, which is building TMF resilience in an ever-evolving clinical trial landscape. I'm joined by friend and long-term colleague Fran Ross, who's going to be presenting for us today. But before I introduce Fran, for those of you that don't know Fran already, I'm going to just give a couple of housekeeping items. If you've been in sessions, I'm sorry, because you've seen this hundreds of times already, I'm sure. But for those of you, if this is your first session, all sessions will be recorded, including this one, and available at the end of the day. So you'll be able to listen back to us at your viewing pleasure. All attendees will receive a certificate of attendance for the entire TMF Week conference, not for each session. So if you've attended 1 or 10 sessions, you will receive 1 certificate. This is an interactive session, so feel free to ask questions. Please throw those questions into the Q&A bubbles in the engagement section. To the right of your screen, you'll see a whole bunch of icons. There's 2 little speech bubbles with a question mark. This is where we want you to throw your questions throughout today's session, and then we will be throwing them at Fran at the end of the presentation. Networking breaks will follow every presentation, so if you please visit the lounge to network and come say hey to the Montreal folks. All right, today's speaker, Fran Ross, Principal Consultant at Lucid GXP. Fran has over 30 years of multifaceted trial compliance experience from roles at clinical site, sponsor, CRO, and as a consultant. As Managing Director at Lucid GXP, she delivers program expertise in next-gen trial operations, e-clinical systems, and GCP inspection surety. Fran knows that health authority regulations and expectations can be met without undue complexity and welcomes the focus on risk management and quality by design coming in revision 3 of ICH E6 GCP. That said, however, Fran is most proud of her Olympic gold medal in croquet. Is that a real fact?
I don't think they have croquet in the Olympics yet, although I have been promoting said.
Let's make it happen. Let's get a petition together to get Fran to the Olympics. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Fran. I'll stop sharing my screen. And if you want to bring your deck up. And people are asking to introduce the pup to the right of you, Fran.
Sure enough. Hi everybody, it's Fran Ross here, and I've got a my live stuffy in the background. Likes to look on to TMF as often as he can. Plus my favorite go-to. I have a 16-year-old child, and there's nothing like walking around the universe with a stuffed animal in your arms to embarrass your 16-year-old. A non-TMF tip for everyone who's joined today. Thanks so much to Oliver and the Montreal team for having a regulations day, because, man, we don't keep TMF for fun. We don't keep TMF because it's cool. We keep TMF because we have to. And what I want to review with you guys today is sort of where are we at in the world of our dealing with remote and multimodal inspections? Where are we at with current regulations and upcoming regulations? What's it like? What's possible to move TMF into a risk-based approach as the health authorities are telling us to do? And then finally, just wrap up with how to keep calm and TMF on. Oliver, I'm hoping you see at the bottom there's a little poll question there. Wanted to quickly poll the audience and see what slice of the TMF universe you're coming from. Are you here from a sponsor, from a clinical trial site, a CRO, a vendor, or are you an inspector? Do we have any inspectors among us? I can't tell if you're running the poll, Oliver.
I am running the poll. So the poll is launched. If you head over to the engagement section, there is a little poll area where you're able to fill out the results next to the Q&A section. So let everybody continue to answer. Unfortunately, Fran, to I'm sure your dismay, there is so far no site representation today. I know. But it seems like a lot of CRO representation. That's the majority so far.
Fantastic.
Almost 50% from the CRO, 30 or so percent from the sponsor, and then we have a fairly sizable contingent from our sort of consultancy. So they're here looking to learn. Oh, we do have some site, 4%. There you go. Welcome, site people.
Yeah, really glad you're here. Happy to look at both sponsor and site. Terrific. And no inspectors, so we can talk trash about our health authorities. Is that true?
I think so.
So the first thing I wanted to talk about was a paper that came out from ICMRA, ICMRA, which is an international regulatory authorities group, much like the TMF reference model is a TMF group. The ICMRA group are a group of health authorities around the globe. And they had a working group who got together to reflect on what the COVID-19 experience has been for GXP inspection. So they covered all modalities of different inspection types. And this paper came out late in 2021, and when you get access to the slide deck, we'll have a link in there to the paper itself if you want to read it. Many challenges, as you can all look. What part of the pandemic didn't present a challenge for any of us working in clinical trials, and the health authorities had challenges, especially around inspections as well. The takeaway message from the paper is that the expectation is that remote inspections or multimodal, some remote, some face-to-face, some live, some distance inspections are going to continue, but it will not supplant in-person inspections at any point. One of the things that's clear when you dig into the paper is the frustration from the health authorities' perspective of not having sort of a one-size-fits-all to be able to do a remote inspection, dealing with many different remote inspection tools, Teams and Zoom and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that they are hoping to see an evolution coming to some kind of universal best practice when a remote inspection is necessary to get done. The other thing that's quite clear is how much more extensive the inspection time period can be when you have to deal with remote aspects. We know from presentations even this week that some inspections have had a duration of as long as 6 months. Now, that's not a 6-month day after day after day inspection. It's sort of like an on-off inspection. The health authorities are very happy to be able to use the various systems that the sponsors and CROs have to support a remote inspection modality. They are slightly flabbergasted at the amount of systems that we seem to be continually throwing at the clinical trial sites, and that, again, no best practices, no universal systems, and sort of a call to industry there to let's try and simplify this journey as much as we can. They did reflect that there are some inspections that cannot be remote, that there's sometimes when they have to get to the facility. And even then, when they did facility inspections, it was sort of eerie to them because often there weren't as many sponsor employees or CRO employees at the inspection site as would be expected. They also missed the opportunity for interaction, right? The recognizing that people can turn their cameras off, can not necessarily have that live interaction was frustrating to the health authorities. The critical thing, I think, to really keep in mind, though, is that there's no notable differences in the inspection results. They were having pretty flat-lined on how many critical, medium, and low inspection issues that were turning up, which I thought was really fascinating and something for all of us to keep in mind. It's tougher to operate during a pandemic, but the situation for inspection results seems to be the same. So what's the take home? It's here to stay. And when one is preparing for inspections, one has to be preparing for all possible scenarios. Need to make sure you've got sufficient flexibility in how you expect the inspection to take place, and also rigor of the systems, not just the systems that you use for clinical trial, but rigor in the remote inspection systems that you might be using. So let's dig into a little bit of our baseline regulations. We're talking at a very high level, some of the regulations you need to, of course, know about and keep an eye on. ICH EA came out with its first revision since 1998, last October. So the critical thing about the revision to E8, and it's not a long reg, and it's a really good reg to consume, sort of an overview of what's our principles about managing quality in clinical trials. It mandates both quality by design, more acronyms, QBD, and assessment of study factors critical to quality, which is CTQ. So from a TMF impact, I mean, really the impact is much more on managing risks and managing quality for the clinical trial. From a TMF perspective, it's important for TMF folks to start looking that those artifact types are being managed by the trial team and uploaded into your eTMF. Risk management plans, QBD actions, and QC, and critical to quality actions. Right in the middle there, we've got a major update to the European regulations. EU CTR 536 is now out, and the system that is underpinning the regulation there is the clinical trial information system, the CTIS platform. The TMF impact of this regulation is not so much. There has been lots of information shared at the reference model meetings about some of the sub-artifacts that have come out of needing to use the CTIS system. Excuse me. The much bigger impact is if you're going to run a clinical trial in Europe, there's a very different process and a very different set of documents you have to get prepared as a package in order to start the CTA, the clinical trial application process. The impact for clinical trials is supposed to be speedier and smoother interaction with any country in the EU community. And the system and its impact went live in January of this year, but there's a 3-year rolling mandate to be using the CTIS. The sub-artifact impact directly to TMF can be managed, and the TMF reference model website's got information on that. In other health authority activity, the MHRA wonderfully went out with a survey to everybody in the universe saying, hey, tell us what your feedback is on our clinical trials regulations, and that the reviewing that survey feedback and making changes to their regulations is ongoing. Expect to hear more from the MHRA over the coming months. There is no commitment from them when the MHRA regulation may be updated. They did participate in a joint GCP meeting in March, and it was phenomenal. It was a virtual conference with MHRA, FDA, and Health Canada, and lots of GCP topics over the 3 days of that conference. It was fantastically open, fantastically communicative from all 3 health authorities. And the takeaway that I took from attending was that interaction, queries, and dialogue, the health authorities are anxious to hear from clinical trial sponsors and CROs. They want to help and support. They, of course, won't probably answer your very detailed question, but they do want to make sure that the world outside of the health authorities understand that they're open for business and they're anxious to help support the journey to clinical trials and to health authority applications. Buckling down a little bit more, we look at what's really core to the TMF management essentials. And the reference model, of course, is probably no news to anybody on this call that the affiliation with CDISC is official as of April 2022. It's a fantastic impact for TMF management. The reference model itself will remain freely available, and we're going to see more and more rigor as the reference model is incorporated into the other CDISC models and becomes an official data standard. As a data standard, it doesn't mean that you have to use all 263 rows. It means that it's a recognized standard with the health authorities and has a recognized cadence and impact for changes. Joining CDISC also gives a reference model a really solid formal seat at the table for health authority interactions and dialogue, and of course the connection with all the other CDISC life science consortia that's out there, CTTI, Transcelerate, etc. Excuse me. Our big bad, though, our big bad reg is right in the middle there, right? ICH E6 revision 2 is still our global standard for TMF management. It's still the global standard for GCP management, right? In 2017, revision 2 came out, and the biggest change was the mandate from the health authorities that everyone take a risk-based approach to trial management. What that means for TMF is that from a TMF perspective, you need to make sure that your study teams have the appropriate risk management documentation. The other wonderful thing about the revision 2 was the recognition from the health authorities that that wonderful section 8, the E6 chart of essential documents, is not the be-all and end-all. Also mandated new controls for TMF, both paper and electronic, and controls for eTMF system, as well as pushing forward the principle in our industry that the PI, the site records, are in the control of the clinical trial principal investigator, that sponsors cannot control investigator site files. And then what's coming? We anticipate revision 3 of ICH E6. The fingers in the wind, we think a draft is likely to come out in the third quarter of this year. And again, they're going to double down on the risk-based approach for trial management and focus on QBD, quality by design. If any of these acronyms or words strike fear into your heart, fear not. There's time to get ahead of the curve, get some more education for yourself, and prepare for taking a risk-based approach. There is anticipated that the health authorities are going to look to the trial sponsors, CROs, and vendor community to make sure all stakeholders are at the table, including clinical trial participants, in protocol development and risk management. We expect that there'll be additional risk management artifacts that will need to be managed within the trial master file. Woo! Okay. Risk. Let's take a risk poll. It's a fairly common statement to say no risk, no reward. Risk is not something to be terrified of. It's something to be embraced, and we're here to help you learn to love taking risk. So I think, Oliver, you've got a poll to launch for this.
I do. The poll is up. And if everybody wants to navigate to the poll section, and you'll be able to see it. We're going to give people a little longer this time, Fran, because I think there might be a small delay between our presentation and the poll being launched. So we'll give everyone ample time. How are you feeling, Fran?
I am feeling like I'm glad this is virtual, because it would be really risky to be sitting in the same room with me today. Thank you, Oliver.
Amazing. We'll keep it open a little longer. Got a nice amount of people here, Fran. Lots of people excited about it, so that's good. And then we're gonna expand on some of these topics in the fireside chat a little bit later on, right? That's gonna be
absolutely. I've got my favorite TMF risk archive story to share in fireside later.
Amazing. Okay, we'll give everybody another 10 seconds. Get your answers in, or forever hold your peace. Wow. So 58.8%, yes, we are using a risk-based approach. Right?
Beautiful.
Yeah. 21.2% no, but we are on our way.
Beautiful.
So that is beautiful. We've got almost 80% of the people in this session are either using or taking a risk-based approach or on their way to doing so, which is pretty phenomenal. 1.9% no, there is no possible way for me to do so. And 18.5% never heard of it. So there's some folks here that need to know a little bit more about risk. Talk to us about risk, Fran.
Yeah. Risk, as I like to noddly say, is not just a four-letter word. Risk is the mandate from the health authority for clinical trial management, and there's no rational reason not to apply that kind of risk-based approach also to TMF management. So I've got four fairly simple components here, and I hope it's showing that the arrow goes back up, because risk management's iterative. It's never one and done. You start at the beginning by stratifying and finding what are our high-risk records, what are our high-risk processes. You can look at where you're not doing so well today. You can look at audit and inspection findings. You can look at the things that keep you up at night. I also like to encourage folks when I support journeys in this to look at places where you're really successful, acknowledge them, celebrate them, and don't measure those, right? You don't need to take a risk-based approach where you're doing well. You need to find the places where there might be spiders in the cabinet. Once you've found those places, planning to measure them, right? So you can't be 100% on this stuff. We suggest using either 3 or 5 as you get the party started. Pick the ones that are keeping you up at night, or the places where you've had failure in the past, or the places that are the risk is so high that you can't not possibly measure it, and don't try to burn down the house, right? 3 to 5. I don't think people starting this journey are successful with more than 7. You really have to pick the ones that you're going to be able to measure and the ones that you're going to be able to have an impact on. Once you've got those found and your measurements of those risks planned, you then want to codify this stuff, of course, put down a TMF, risk-based management plan. This is not the TMF plan for the trial. This is the plan for TMF management across your company. And then learn how it's going, measure the impact. Whatever you've done to plan those measurements, you got to get the data churning and take a look at how it's going on whatever iterative basis you decide, right? Are you looking at risk-based management monthly? Are you looking at it quarterly? Some measurements you might look at different time periods. It's not so much the what, it's the do, right? There's nothing, you can't make any progress moving forward in this kind of behavior unless you get the party started. Once you've measured your impacts, you want to have a multi-tiered approach to celebration, right? You want to make sure the results of your impact is publicized and publicized throughout your organization. You need to get executive support to be able to continue on that journey. You want to celebrate your wins and also celebrate your lessons. If you're learning that some high-risk areas or some high-risk records aren't being managed well, that's something to be happy about, because you have an opportunity then to take some differences in processes or differences in your systems and make a direct impact. And then, of course, you circle all the way back up. Once you've gone through cycles, you check it again, right? Where are we now? What's our high risk now? How can we measure those high risk things and update your risk management plan and keep moving forward? So a lot of people feel like if we expose our problems in TMF, we're going to get significantly dinged. And I argue the alternative is actually true. If you expose to the health authorities that you're consciously taking a risk-based approach to TMF management, have targeted things, and are looking to improve those things, you're going to be in better stead in inspection rather than in worse stead. So in the big picture, how does this all sort of wrap together for TMF management? Just keep calm and TMF on. Oliver, I'm going to make you say that French phrase, but what it means is, can you say it? No. I won't butcher the French, but basically it means the more things change, the more things stay the same. Since we're still operating under E6 revision 2, and that came out in 2017, there's not much different in the TMF landscape for basics, so focus on your basics. I'm going to change my statement immediately. We focus on your basics when it comes to TMF management, but focusing on inspection prep is a little bit different because of the pandemic. So you really do need to prepare for, I love this word, and I don't mean love, multimodal inspection possibilities. You may be inspected face-to-face, you may be inspected remote, or you may be inspected hybrid. So consulting the health authorities, like I said before, I firmly believe the door is open there for dialogue and for discussions on what's worked and what hasn't worked. There are inspection rule books available from all of the health authorities. Check those out. There's the IMCRA paper that can be leveraged to get a sense of how the inspectors are feeling today. There's also many people who've gone through inspections, whether they've been in a supporting capacity or had to deal with the inspection live and direct, and they're happy to talk about it. They're happy to help, happy to make sure that folks are feeling more confident about this new pandemic inspection universe. When you run a mock inspection, and boy, you sure better run mock inspections, you want to make sure that you really highly pressure test the remote access capabilities, then that there's sufficient technical support and enduring technical support, because these inspections can have this on and off kind of sensibility to them. Inspections can be of longer duration, although not higher intensity. So you want to make sure that there's tech support available in case an inspector's on for a couple of weeks and then gone for 6 and back the next week. Can they still get the help that they need? I think I'm like the 90th person in TMF week to say, make sure you have fail-safe plans. There's always you need to make sure you've got a backup to the backup. And finally, you want to remember every inspector is a human being, right, with their own personal preferences and their own practices, the impact to the pandemic on them and their family. Try not to have a sensibility that there aren't humans at the table here, and that humans understand that things can be problematic and that there's always a way to work things out. From a TMF fundamentals perspective, regardless of the modality of what you're anticipating for an inspection or in the middle of an inspection, TMFs still have to be timely, accurate, and complete. It's the big 3 of TMF management, right? Timely, we've known from many wonderful people who've shared their inspection stories, more critical than ever. The health authorities are quite quick to go in and look at record timing and record management timing and ask pertinent questions about how timely your TMF is if there's a big gap there. Accuracy of the records, Jamie really beautifully spoke about all the principles about COAC, SIA, COAC Plus. You need to have a plan in place to make sure that you're sufficiently accurate within your TMF record set. And complete. Complete's a real tough nut to crack because we're running experiments on humans. So we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You heard before from other experts about the powers of storyboarding. There's much power in eTMF systems today to give you indicators of completeness, but you can't have a complete TMF unless you have that trial team at the table and you work through the details on whether that TMF tells the full trial story. Using the TMF index or TMF plan, whatever listing you've used for that particular trial, along with questions and pointed discussion with the trialists about the TMF completeness is, I believe, the way to go. And that's my favorite joke from Stephen Wright. It is a small world, but I wouldn't want to have to paint it. 100% is our goal, but 100% is probably not an achievable milestone for completeness, but complete enough is good enough for the health authorities as well. Finally, want to make sure you think about taking a risk-based approach. Iterative improvements here, right? You don't go to running before you're crawling and walking. The point of taking a risk-based approach is just to get started, right? The data for a risk-based approach is possible whether you're running paper still TMFs or an eTMF, and you want to make sure you celebrate what you've learned as much as you celebrate how far you've come. The rationale to take a risk-based approach is to get TMF done right the first time, one time, so that you can be sure you're inspection ready at the start, middle, and certainly by the end of the clinical trial. And our god of quality, Edward Deming, says, without that data, you're just another person with an opinion. So make sure you are getting the data that you need to prove that your TMF has been sufficiently risk managed. So many people have come up with some great taglines this week about what TMF is, and TMF, I think as an industry, we need to do more to make sure all the way up through the executive chains, they understand that TMF is an enormous expense and burden. So we need to do it right the first time. We need to get it right from the start and keep it right and close it right, right? It takes, however, iterative actions to get TMF plans, TMF risk management plans up to snuff and execute those plans and then redo that work again, right, to make sure that your TMF is complete and accurate from the start to the finish. And the regulators are very clearly demanding that the trial community takes a risk-based approach to trial management. Now's the time to apply that also to TMF. And a quote from the very sincere Francis Lillian Ross, it's GCP, it's good clinical practice, it's not PCP, it's not perfect clinical practice. So be kind to yourself and keep moving forward. All right, Oliver.
I'm back.
I'm here.
Oh, yeah, you are here. Perfect. So we'll do a little bit of Q&A and then we'll introduce the next section. Good news is that we've got 15 minutes to grill Fran. So first question comes from Joanne. Do you have any suggested reference material or template or checklist for QBD that you could either share or point folks towards?
Yeah, there's great stuff out there, and I can make sure, Oliver, to reiterate to revise the deck and put some industry suggestions in there. From a TMF perspective, I suggest you start with what your trial teams are doing to risk manage the trial, right? Because you don't want to deviate from their intensive actions in QBD if those are going on. If there are none of those going on, then be the vanguard at your organization to say, hey, health authorities are demanding it, let's try it here, as the people running the clinical trials think, oh yeah, we better get that moving up on a higher level. And there are some great industry resources. And again, I'll put those links in the deck the next time I'll push a new version later on today.
Amazing.
Did that answer the question? Keep me honest.
Joanne, let us know if that answers your question in the chat. Second question, easy one. What's your favorite acronym?
Teach me French. I brought down the house when Sanofi bought Genzyme with that acronym with a large audience of people. Too much fun, and there are other ways to say TMF that aren't maybe so polite. Some days those are my favorite acronyms.
Okay, perfect. You mentioned something as you were going through some of the regulation insights around site files. And this is going to be a larger discussion, I'm sure, later on this afternoon. But you mentioned that sponsors can't control the investigator site files. And I find that this is a very, very, it's a tough topic because a lot of people get it wrong. Yeah. So maybe could you just sort of explain, how do you interpret that, and sure, what does that mean, and how does it, because I think there's a lot of sponsors on the line today that are looking to try and enable and empower sites, but sometimes I think we're getting it wrong.
So I think the problem is we use the word site twice, right? In TMF, there are site subsections for every clinical site that's open with that sponsor. And there may be records in the TMF site section that don't belong in the investigator site file, and that's fine. What I ask, who last touched it? That's my rule for record ownership. Who's the last party that had a origination impact on that record? So for me, a 1572, for me, it's obvious that that's the principal investigators because they sign it, right? And the clinical trial agreement, the informed consent form template at the site, right? So if you try to just keep clear on last originator, then it can be fairly easy to say, and that stuff would necessarily belong. That's an original record of the investigator site file. I don't think there's any hard and fast rules, though, Oliver. And I think if a sponsor should declare, hey, the 1572 is ours, I think that's fine. Well, the point is to declare whose record it is. And for those records that are declared in the investigator's site file, the investigator has to hold control of that record. They don't have to control the system necessarily, but they have to be able to update that record, redact that record. It's their record. That answer the question?
I think so, and I think we'll go probably into it in a bit more detail when we get Etienne on the session later on. Obviously, coming from Duke, so maybe he can give his perspective also on that.
That'd be great.
You mentioned risk towards the middle and end of this presentation. I think we talked a lot about what risk-based approach means and some of the potential benefits. But what would you recommend if an organization is looking to move towards risk-based? What's the first step that they should take?
Don't embark on this journey as a significant effort without significant support from your executives. If your executives have another focus for the organization, then when you come to publishing your measurements, surprising people with where you're at is never a good thing, right? So you want to make sure you've got executive support before you embark on RBM. There are so many different ways to look at and slice and dice the data. Pick 3, pick 5, pick 7, pick a small set and get moving. You don't know what you don't know until you're looking at the results, right? So that's step 2. And step 3 is make sure no matter whether the results are positive, negative, or neutral, that you publicize all those results and celebrate them all as learnings, right? It's great that we're 100% here, and it's great that we're 20% there, because that gives us an opportunity to have a real direct impact. And I'm going to shut up. Did that answer it?
I think that was a good answer. I'm going to ask you another question that follows on from that, because your first step was trying to understand how do you align with leadership. And I think when the TMF community or the TMF group within an organization often has a hard time justifying, their skin when it comes to TMF and how important it is. And I know that that's a soapbox that you get on. How are they going to now try and convince leadership that risk-based is an approach that they need to move forward? Or any tactics there?
It may be before you embark on looking at RB measurements that you have to do some quantification of how much your TMF costs you today. And in some organizations, that number is fairly astounding when you look at what it costs to manage a record and then to remanage a record and then remanage a record and then remanage a record. I've seen iterations of up to 8 times of what one poor little record can go through, and it's fairly easy to quantify that. If you can measure the process steps, you'd know roughly what the people who do those process steps have, what they make a year, and you can boil it on down to we're spending $3 a page, right? So if you believe that your organization has no risk appetite, the first thing you want to do is look at the money.
Maybe that you just gave me an idea. Maybe we'll come up with a TMF cost calculator. How is TMF costing you today? I like that. Let's have a look. We've got a couple more questions and we've got a bunch of time, so that's good. Genevieve mentioned, are mock inspections, or she asked, I should say, are mock inspections the same as internal audits for you, Fran?
They are not. Although it would be so wonderful. I hope maybe there's a quality person listening to my plea right now. Stop the audits. Run mock inspections. Because we don't keep a TMF except because we have to for the purpose of an inspection. There's a lot of value for an organization to run different process audits. So don't get me wrong, process audits are great. But when someone is specifically looking at a particular trial or a particular product's trial master files, I love to see those auditors running it with an inspector hat on rather than more of a process audit hat. What was the question?
Inspections, audits, are they the same? I think you said no.
So audits are internal, inspections are external, right? Your audits are your opportunity to dial into what processes may have weakness and improve them. Inspections are the health authorities at the door.
Perfect. From TMF reference model point of view, how many artifacts will come with a risk-based QC parameter?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, we should have run that poll. Are you still doing 100% QC? Why? There is a wonderful paper, and when I do the revisions of this deck, Oliver, please keep me honest. There's folks, I believe, from Germany, at very least from Europe, took a run at assigning a risk value for all of the artifacts in the reference model. And that's a wonderful place to start when you think about what does risk mean for our organization. And certainly, depending on what health authority you anticipate inspecting you, they've got guidebooks too, and you can look at the first 10 things they're going to ask for, and boy, those are high risk records. So there's a few different ways you can slice it. And one size does not fit all in risk, because for different trial types, gene therapy risk is going to be different than oncology risk. It's going to be different than a medical device risk.
Love it. Another question on mock inspections. Always seems to be lots of questions around mock inspection. So when we're running a mock inspection internally, Casey asks, who would you recommend be the inspector of the TMF within that mock inspection? What that role? Would it be the TMF manager, someone from QA, or an inspection readiness team, if there was one, or would it be more of a team approach?
Here's what I love for mock inspection approaches. You identify the different roles that you're going to need to have to conquer for those inspections, and have people try out different roles. There's no way to fail a mock inspection, right? It's a period of learning, it's a period of experience, and acting as the clinical trial manager, acting as the TMF process owner, acting as the health authority inspector, or the person supporting their journey from a quality perspective, it really helps sharpen the mind about, well, what can this experience be like, and how do we conquer this mountain best? There's a bajillion and a half, I think that's the accurate number, Oliver, of experts out there who can come in and show you how the inspector role is generally managed. Some of them are former inspectors, some have gone through lots of inspections. There's always industry peeps to get help from as well.
Awesome. I think what I'll do is that I'll ask a last question to you, Fran, which will be, if anyone wants to connect with you and drill you with some more questions, where's the best place for them to connect with you?
Yeah, you can ping me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's my favorite industry comms tool, and put my my email address in the last iteration of the deck too.
Amazing. All right, well, with that, I will just double check we have no more questions. Oh, we have one more question. As inspections are done by authorities, should we get health authorities involved in mock inspections? If yes, how?
Yeah, I don't think they will. But
no.
What they are willing, so every health authority has got a Q&A page. If you're not aware of that, go Google's your best friend. So you can always post questions in those Q&A pages, and they're not going to tell you anything. They'll never answer a specific, like, should we use Teams or should we use Zoom? They will not answer that question. But if you ask a more general question, like, would the health authority prefer A, B, or C, you may get a sensibility of preference. You can also get yourself or your colleagues to the industry conferences where the health authorities present and attend. They often hold side panel discussions, AMA, Ask Me Anything, and those conferences can be very illuminating about their perspectives and their preferences.
Amazing. On the subject of AMA, so in roughly, what are we looking at? In roughly about 1 hour and 15 minutes, we're going to be kicking off the last session of today, which is a panel discussion led by Fran Ross, where you'll be able to tackle even more questions. We're going to be covering a whole range of subjects. And we're joined by Etienne Hinton from Duke Clinical Research, Paul Fenton from Montreal, our president and CEO. We've got JP Michelli from Advanced Clinical and Robin Farmer from Grail. And we also have Joanne Malia from Regeneron, which I should add also. That's not on this graphic, but Joanne will be there too. So we've got a star-studded cast of anyone who's anyone in TMF is at this fireside chat. We've got a whole bunch of questions that have been asked in advance. At the end of this session, you'll get prompted with a survey. If you have any other questions that you want to throw into that. Any questions that we couldn't answer today, throw them into that. We will do an export before the session this afternoon, and we'll run through all of those questions as we go through the session. So with that, I'll close it for today. Thank you everyone for being here and joining. And Fran, thank you of course for soldiering forward in spite of sickness. And we'll see you in an hour where you'll have to continue your resilient presentations.
Thank you, Oliver. Thanks.
Amazing. Just keep the presentation open a little longer. Make sure everybody doesn't get cut off. I'm not sure what the delay is, but we'll see.
30 seconds should do it. Thank you, Casey. I'll see you soon, Oliver.
Okay, thanks, Fran.